Hi guys, Marika here with the real-time coloring version of Hathor. If you haven't seen the card tutorial video and want to see it, you would see a little note in the corner where you can click on to go to the real-time coloring video. So jump in directly to the coloring. This is Hathor. This is Polka Dot Pals Hathor. It is by Little Miss Muffet Stamps. You can find her on the littlemissmuffetstamps.com website. She is a digi and she's just adorable. She's a polka dot pals. That means she comes with pupils and eyebrows, and that it is. So you can add your own faces to these characters, which I love doing. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm going in with a pencil. This is a 0.5 pencil. And I'm adding some details. So to figure out how I wanted her to look, I googled Egyptian because she's a mummy. Most mummies are Egyptian. There are some other mummies out there too, I know that, but most wrapped mummies are Egyptian. And it looks like she has one of the Egyptians' god as the kind of headdress. And the first images that came up was this of this golden what's it called, coffin for, I think it's Tutankhamun. I love Egyptian mythology and history and everything, so I think it actually is Tutankhamun. And I decided I wanted to make her face look like that. So first I sketch it out, and then I'm using a little bit of a kneaded eraser, and then you just lift up as much as you can without losing your lines. So you have very light lines, which means I don't have to erase on top of the marker. I have a tendency to do it too quickly otherwise, and then it's all destroying the image and I have to redo it. So yeah, I really love my kneaded eraser. For the eyes, I when I look at the eyes on Tutankhamun, what I see is that it has a pretty high arc above the eyes, but a kind of a flat line underneath it. So I try to get that into the image. He also had this cute little button nose, which I also tried adding. And then the voluminous lips, which I really wanted to capture also, to give all of that to him. Her. Tutankhamun supposed to be him. She is a her. Yeah. But anyhow, you can actually make her into a him. Just because I kind of thought long hair was girl doesn't mean that it is. You can make a male out of that. You can probably make a male out of that. But yeah. Next part is the skin. When I do skin, I have my kind of go-to. I was considering doing some kind of more like mummy skin, and then I got stuck, and then I just went to my go-to color scheme, which is a Caucasian color scheme, but that is how it is. I'm starting out by adding all of the kind of shadows in the face with the E50s, kind of trying out, does this look okay? Is this how I want it to look? And when I'm finished adding all of the shadows on the rest of the skin, this also helps me kind of map out where the skin is on this mummy, because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to have more skin shown than it is. Actually ending up giving her a little bit of a tummy, him or her, a little bit of a tummy, because that kind of gives that feeling that she's totally wrapped. For the shadows, the darkest shadows, I'm using the EO4. I really like using a very contrasty color for the skin. I know Sandy Alnock uses the blue violets often, and there's a lot of different darker colors you can use. It all depends on what kind of color scheme and kind of skin you're after. I really like using the EO4 for the absolute darkest colors. And when I'm using the E04, I'm using it very, very sparingly. And that is also one thing to think about. You want contrast, but if you add too much of one of the colors, you will lose the contrast and you will lose the dimension. So I'm using 5 colors, and I'm basically using it so that I'm using very teeny tiny of the E04, and I'm using very teeny tiny of the E50. And then I'm using about equally of the E11, E21 and E00. And that is how I build up my dimension. When I'm going in with the E11, I'm making sure that I go over with the E11 on all the parts where the E04 is. Because the E04 is a very potent color, and I'm actually dulling it down by going in with the E11 on top of it. If I wasn't going in with the E11 on top of it and kind of pushing it down into the face, the E11 might stand out a little bit too much, be a little bit too dark. So that is the trick. That is also a way to get away with using a lot darker colors, is that when you go over with your medium color, you go over the whole thing you have colored, and that will push the color down into the paper and leave it with a lighter version of what you colored. It's all about color experimenting. Then I'm going in with my E21 for the above on the E11, and as you see here, this is where I start kind of really shaping the face to look the way I want it to. Thinking about where are all the shadows, where should they be. This is also where I'm giving her these very high cheekbones, which I think actually is an Egyptian thing. It's really strong facial features, and even though she has a very round face, you can actually give her those really strong facial features if you want to. This also will make it look more like a girl than a man, or more feminine features, by giving them high cheekbones, trying to make your chin a little bit thinner. Those are things kind of you can think about what the difference between a male and a female in what you see. And for the last part, I went in with the E00, and now I'm going in with the E50 to kind of blend out the last parts, being the last color in the color scheme. For the lips, I'm actually using the skin colors that I used before, but I'm going in with just the darker ones, and actually pretty heavy with the E04 and the E11, and using the E21 as the lightest, because then you have a little bit of a darker lip, which we usually have, but it doesn't look like she has a lot of makeup, and that was also one of the ideas behind it. Finishing off with some R30 to give her cheeks a little bit of a color, and then her eyes. I'm starting with the E49, doing the kind of upper lid or upper shadows. Then I kind of realized I wanted to go with the E44 and do the whole iris, and then going in with the rest of the shadows with the E47, because then it's easier to place the shadows in the iris, and then I'm just blending it out with the E44. For shadows, I'm using B63, which is my go-to shadow color. Now I'm gonna do some makeup on her. I'm using a Starburst metallic, like Jelly Roll metallic blue pen. This is the last part of the face. You don't want to add Jelly Roll and then add Copics on top, because that can hurt the nibs. But as this is the last part, I'm going in with that. And I also felt that I wanted to pick those blue eyebrows, very strong eyebrows that the golden face had. This also kind of ties in the face a little bit more, gives her more strength, more features. The next part is her wrappings. I'm coloring them in the E40s because mummy wrappings are a little bit like yellow. They are, I think they're like linen. I don't know, cotton. Yeah, they're cotton, I think. At least on Egyptian mummies, I think they're supposed to be cotton. But I'm going in with the E43 because they have mummy wrappings have laid there for a long time, so they have jelloed. And I'm gonna go in with the E43, 42, 41 and 40. You don't really need all of those. It can be a little bit fiddly. You could use just 3. You can even use 2, but then you would want to have a contrast between the 2, so either E43 and E41, or even go as far as E43 and E40. I, however, go in with all 4 of the colors because I kind of like going in with all of them. I'm doing shadows both on top and below these kind of wrappings, so that you get the illusion that some are lying on top and some are lying beneath, kind of making the wrappings come alive, giving them some dimension and making them alive. The mummy is alive. Sorry, I just had to. Sorry. But I'm going in with the E42 to kind of just do what I always do, blend out the shadows. This is where I think I want to go about half of the shadow. So the E43 I just added details, then with the E42 I'm going in to do about half, up to a half of the shadowing, or the whole wrapping basically. And then I'm going to go in with the E41, where I'm going in to almost fill in all of it, just leaving a sliver, which is about the same amount of the E43 I went in with. But this time I'm leaving the white, because that is going to be our highlights. And for the last part with the E40s, I'm just filling in those highlights. And the reason for filling in those highlights is because that makes them look a part of the dressing instead of something you forgot to color. I did a lot when I was younger. I did a lot of, especially on hair, where I used the highlights. I left some of the highlights white. This works awesome if you're going for a light blonde, for like a platinum blonde. Then you want to work with the white and have the white as a part of you, the white in the paper to be part of the hair. But most times, otherwise, leaving it really, really, really white can actually make it look unfinished or more busy. But then again, leaving it white is... some people has it as a technique, and if you like how it looks, then do it. As I say with all of my coloring, there is no right or wrong, but there is, everyone has their own idea what is art and what kind of art looks good. And for me personally, I like finished. I want clean and simple, and I want images where the image is speaking behind the coloring, where not the coloring that is speaking for the image, basically. I probably lost you somewhere there, but anyhow, now we're coming to the hair, and there's a new thing I'm doing with the hair, which I think is a lot of fun, and that is kind of this is taking from some of the art videos I've seen, especially comics and such, and that is, there's something called cast light. So you have your light source, which basically is, in my case right now, in the upper right corner, and then you have the cast light, or the reflecting light, that comes from your light source reflecting on something behind you and reflecting back. So those light sources would be a little bit smaller and not as prominent as the light sources coming from your main light source. And this will kind of help. Using that, you can actually help making things stand out between each other. And in case of her hair, that is one of the things I'm doing with her hair, and that is I'm coloring in the middle of the strands, and I'm leaving a very thin edge on both sides. And this is going to, sorry, I'm waving my hands around when I'm talking to you. I'm just almost got the mic to the floor. But anyhow, the edge, I will color it over with the lightest color in the end, but it will help the strands to stand out. And this is a very good way of kind of learning how to color dark colors, or especially dark hair. If you separate the strands, because of the W10 being as dark as it is, if I would just color every strand the same color, it would just be a big blob. I need something to define each strand from each other to reduce the blobness. Is that a word? Probably not. So what I'm doing is then, when I'm done my W10, I'm going in with my W8 and I'm elongating every strand. In some places I am letting the strands go together, basically where it is the darkest, underneath and behind her head and such. I'm letting it kind of go together, but I'm still trying to keep, even when I'm elongating and I'm leaving with the W8, I'm also leaving those edges down to separate. Then I'm going in with the W6, which is my next lightest color. And again, continuing to elongate this, and at the same time making those edges a little bit smaller. So I'm going in and I'm coloring in the sides of the black and then elongating the black. But I'm still leaving that itty bitty kind of sliver on both sides to make these strands individuals. And as you can see in her hair, just beneath her behind her head, you can see the effect where I've actually gone over with the W6 all over, but you still see the separate strands just because I started with the W10 and making strands that way. Then I'm just going in and kind of trying to fill in everywhere except for those lightest slivers around those. Kind of thinking about what is closer to you. The strands that are closest to the viewer are the ones that are going to be the lightest, and the strands that are furthest away are going to be the darkest. For the last part, I'm going in with the W4, which is my lightest color, and I am filling in all strands one at a time with my W4. So now I'm going in and I'm covering those slivers. And because the W4 is so light, you now get them to stand out from each other. And because I'm going in with a color, I'm not leaving them stark white, it looks complete. So that is a big tip from me. The lighter you go, however, you can leave the white edges if the white would be a natural color of the hair. Like if you would go for platinum blonde hair, then the white would be a natural part of it, and then you can leave it white. But maybe then you want to color the background a little bit or something to make those edges look more deliberate. Now we're going to get her jewelry, her headdress and everything. I'm going to use the Y20s. And the reason why I chose the Y20s is because the darkest I'm using is going to be the Y28, and it's called Lioness Gold. So it must be perfect for gold. I also don't want it to be a very yellowish gold, because that would kind of stand out too much. I want her whole outfit to be cohesive, very, very cohesive. So therefore I'm going in with the Y20s. I'm filling out everything that is going to be gold with the Y21 first, because I want the Y21 to have dual layers to give it a little bit of a darker color, because I feel that it's a little bit light on a single layer. And to layer these colors, you really want to, if you want to layer one color, you want to let it dry in between. And by doing the shadows, it actually dries, not where the shadow is, but that won't be a problem. But I'm doing the shadows on top, which leaves the lightest of the yellow to dry, which makes it easier to make a second layer that goes darker. I hope you understand. For the middle color, I'm using Mustard, the Y26, which actually works pretty great because it's a muted gold. So it kind of ties together the muted colors of the wrappings and the muted colors of her hair. Which also kind of brings her skin and her face to focus. So that is, if you want someone to focus on a special part of a card, you would go with the brightest colors, the most bold colors on that part. Because that would be the one thing that pops. And this is going to, and in this card, that actually will be her little trick or treat bag, but that is because I just wanted it to be orange. For the jewelries, I'm going in with the R24 and the R27 because I want them to look really, really red. So that is, I could even have gone to the R29 for the shadows to get even more dimension. For the little pumpkin, I'm using wire 15, which is pumpkin. The color is called pumpkin yellow. So, of course, I needed to have that one as my pumpkin. I'm coloring all around the face of the pumpkin, but I really don't need to because I'm going to color over it anyway. But yeah, and I'm using the same oranges on the mid part of those little candies because then you kind of tie it together. For my darkest color for the pumpkin, I'm using YR18 because it is in the same color family as the YR15. They will blend a little bit easier. So I'm just adding a little bit of dimension where the pumpkin folds are and in the inside of that little pumpkin thingy. And I'm adding some shadowing on top of those candies. Those candies need at most 2 colors. I'm using 3 because I'm using those colors on the pumpkin bag, but you really don't need at the most 2 colors. You don't even need that. You can use 1 color per band. If you really want dimension, use 2, but they're so tiny you hardly see it anyway. It's just that, you know, I got a problem with using too many colors. For the kind of bottom of it, I'm using Y17 and Y15. So I'm just using 2 colors because I thought it would stupid to use. And then I'm using W0 to have a little dot of shadowing on top of those. You don't see it, but yeah. For because I'm gonna cut this out in a square die, I'm actually adding a little bit of shadow to ground her to look like she's standing on something white. And I'm using my W4, 2 and 0 to do that. Just very simply adding some shadow because it looks great. I like shadowing. I like grounding characters. They look like more of a part of the image. And to finish her off, I'm actually going in with a little white gel pen. I'm adding a little small teeny tiny details on top of those kind of, what's it called? Jewels? That's the word. To make them look like they are shining. because that will actually lead to that detail. And then I'm adding a little bit extra white in her eyes to give them a little bit more shine. And that is the coloring for this. If you want to see me do the card, you have the little eye up in the corner. These are 2 links to 2 other real-time coloring videos if you want to see more coloring from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!